Al Pacino, one of the most iconic and legendary actors in Hollywood history, has lived a life filled with fame, success, struggles, and emotional depth that few stars in the entertainment industry have ever experienced. At 85 years old, his journey continues to fascinate fans across the world, not only because of his unforgettable performances in films like The Godfather, Scarface, and Scent of a Woman, but also because of the deeply human story behind the man himself. In recent years, discussions around his life have taken a more emotional turn, as fans reflect on aging, legacy, and the reality of growing old in the spotlight. What truly happened after the so-called heartbreaking truth about his later life became public is not a story of downfall, but rather a reflection of time, change, and the quiet evolution of a Hollywood legend. As Pacino stepped further into his 80s, audiences began to notice a shift in his public appearances. The once fiery, intense presence that dominated the screen with unmatched energy now appeared calmer, more reflective, and deeply thoughtful. This change was not sudden, but rather a natural transition that comes with age. For fans who grew up watching him as Michael Corleone or Tony Montana, this transformation felt emotional, almost symbolic of the passing of an era. The heartbreaking truth that many media narratives referred to was not a scandal or tragedy, but the undeniable reality of aging, something even legends cannot escape. In truth, Al Pacino's later years have been marked by a quiet withdrawal from the constant chaos of Hollywood. After decades of back-to-back roles, awards, and global recognition, he began to prioritize a more private and peaceful life. Instead of chasing the spotlight, he shifted his focus toward personal reflection, occasional acting projects, and spending time with close friends and family. This change surprised many fans, especially those who were used to seeing him in powerful, dominating roles on screen. However, for Pacino himself, this phase represents not an ending, but a new chapter defined by acceptance and calm. One of the most talked about aspects of his recent life has been his experience with fatherhood later in life. Becoming a father again in his 80s brought both joy and public curiosity. While some viewed it as unusual, others saw it as a deeply personal and meaningful moment in his journey. For Pacino, this experience reportedly brought a renewed sense of responsibility and emotional grounding. It reminded him that life continues to evolve regardless of age, and that even in later years, new beginnings are still possible. This development added a complex layer to how fans perceive him, not just as a legendary actor, but as a man still experiencing life in real time. Despite his age, Pacino has not completely stepped away from acting. Instead, he has become more selective, choosing roles that resonate with him personally rather than chasing commercial success. This selective approach has allowed him to maintain artistic integrity while also protecting his energy and well-being. In interviews over the years, he has expressed gratitude for his long career, acknowledging both the highs and lows that shaped him as an artist. His perspective on fame has also evolved. Where once there was intensity and ambition, there is now wisdom and acceptance. The emotional reaction from fans around the world has been significant. Many who grew up with his films feel a deep connection to his journey, almost as if they are watching a part of cinematic history grow older alongside them. Social media platforms are often filled with tributes, nostalgic clips, and emotional messages whenever his name trends. For many, Al Pacino represents not just an actor, but an era of filmmaking that defined masculinity, intensity, and storytelling in Hollywood's golden modern age. However, with admiration also comes speculation. Over the years, various headlines and narratives have exaggerated aspects of his personal life, often framing natural aging as tragedy. The idea of a heartbreaking truth is frequently used in entertainment media to attract attention, even when the reality is far more grounded. In Pacino's case, the truth is simpler. He is an aging artist who has chosen peace, privacy, and selectivity over constant public exposure. While some fans interpret this as sadness, others see it as dignity. Behind the scenes, those who have worked with him describe him as still passionate about acting, still deeply analytical about his roles, and still carrying the same creative spark that defined his youth. What has changed is not his talent, but his relationship with the industry. He no longer seeks validation through constant output, but rather values meaningful contributions when they come. This shift reflects a broader truth about aging artists. At some point, the pursuit of legacy replaces the pursuit of fame. As time continues to move forward, Al Pacino's presence in Hollywood becomes more symbolic than active. He stands as a living legend whose body of work speaks louder than any new release. Younger generations continue to discover his films, often expressing shock at the intensity and depth of his performances. In many ways, his legacy continues to grow even as his public appearances become fewer. The so-called heartbreaking truth surrounding his life at 85 is ultimately not about loss, but about transformation. It is about a man who has lived through decades of cultural change, cinematic evolution, personal growth, and public scrutiny, and who now stands in a space of reflection, rather than fading into sadness. His story reflects resilience, the ability to adapt to time while maintaining identity. In conclusion, what happened after the emotional narrative surrounding Al Pacino's later years was revealed is not a tragedy, but a human story. It is the story of an artist who gave his life to cinema and who now, in his later years, embraces a quieter existence shaped by experience and wisdom. Fans may feel emotional seeing him age, but his journey is also a reminder that even legends are human, and even legends deserve peace. His legacy is not ending. It is simply entering its final, most reflective chapter, one defined not by intensity, but by meaning. In the years following this emotional wave of attention around Al Pacino's life at 85, fans continued to closely follow every small update about the legendary actor, hoping to understand how he was truly spending his time away from the constant spotlight. What became increasingly clear was that Pacino was not disappearing in sadness, as some headlines suggested, but rather stepping into a more intentional and peaceful stage of life. After decades of carrying the weight of Hollywood's biggest roles, he appeared to be embracing simplicity, choosing moments of calm over the chaos of fame. Close sources and occasional public appearances painted a picture of a man who still carries immense passion for storytelling, but no longer feels the pressure to constantly prove himself. Instead, he has developed a deeper connection with the craft itself, valuing quality over quantity. This shift is something many veteran actors experience, but in Pacino's case, it feels especially meaningful due to the scale of his legacy. Every performance he delivered in his earlier years set a standard that few could match. And now, in his later life, that legacy stands complete on its own. One of the most emotional aspects for fans has been witnessing how time has changed not just his appearance, but also his perspective. The intense energy that once defined him on screen has transformed into quiet reflection. Interviews from recent years show a man who speaks more about gratitude than ambition, more about memory than future plans. This does not indicate loss of purpose, but rather a shift in focus, from building a career to appreciating the life he has already built. At the same time, Pacino's continued connection to acting has prevented his story from becoming one of full retirement or disappearance. Even in selective roles, he brings the same depth and seriousness that made him famous in the first place. Colleagues often describe him as someone who still analyzes every line, every expression, and every emotional beat with precision. This dedication, even at 85, is part of why his presence remains so respected in the industry. The emotional narrative that once surrounded his heartbreaking truth gradually softened as fans began to understand the reality more clearly. Aging, after all, is not a tragedy. It is a universal journey. For someone who has lived most of his life in front of cameras, every change becomes more visible, more discussed, and sometimes more exaggerated. But underneath all the headlines, the truth is simple. Al Pacino is living a quieter, more private version of a life that was once defined by global fame. In many ways, this stage of his life has also allowed fans to